Are we going to be offering this podcast as an NFT after this?
Oh, can we do that? I
We
didn't even
can
think about
absolutely
that.
do that. We can totally drop it on OpenSea and everything, man. Yeah, absolutely.
We can each make 15 cents maybe or something. Where the gas fees will be higher than.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and blow all of it on gas fees.
We'll sell it for an ETH, and then no one will buy it for 5 years, and then it'll be known as a historical NFT, and Gary V will totally be all over it 6 years from now. It's gonna be great.
That's so funny.
Can I get the icon in cornflower blue?
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 13 of Can I Get That Software in Blue? I'm one of your hosts, Chad Tindel, and I have with me a bevy, one might even say a plethora of talking heads. So let's do some introductions. You see him here every episode. That's because he's my co-host, the MVP of VPs, the Sultana of Grafana, Steve.
Oh.
I hate elevator music, Mayzak.
This is the best intro ever. Thanks, Chad.
I was
Welcome,
inspired by last week's All In podcast with Jake Kell's hilarious.
Oh man, you're
intros,
one
so
upping him right now. This is awesome.
I'm trying. I don't have people punching me up though. He's got pros to write for him.
Dude, you clearly don't need it.
I don't have that. So we'll see how long I can keep it going without the professional punch ups. Okay. He joined us once as a bestie guestie because he's a crypto expert. And now he's back as a bestie guestie host. Basically, so we have someone who actually knows what he's talking about for this episode. He's an AWS Blockchain Specialist and runs an extraordinarily popular YouTube channel on crypto topics. This man loves to wow with the Dow. He's part of the bourgeoisie in the Web3 Jubilee. Here to help us see through the trees, Forrest Colyer. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. And I'm gonna get that tattooed for sure.
All right. Well, maybe we'll sell an NFT of that too. Yeah. All right. We're joined today by a special guest who actually has lived a pretty interesting life. He studied at the Theater Conservatory at Chicago College of Performing Arts and was on the road for a decade, touring nationally with Broadway shows. In fact, I see that he's grown his Tevye beard back, which is outstanding. I think he had that when I first met him. He then launched his own very successful digital design and marketing firm, which he ran for 10 years, and now he's gone in-house with Gary Vaynerchuk, a.k.a. Gary V, as a creative director at VaynerNFT. He's the man who is here to tease his NFTs. Matt Callahan, welcome to the show.
Wow, these intros are really poetry, Chad. I'm a big fan. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I love it, man. Good to be here.
Long-time listener, first-time caller, right?
That's right.
Right on.
One of the things I like about Matt and his wife is that they're always hustling. They're always working hard. They used to be my neighbors, actually, and their wall in their office was like a giant flow chart of all the different projects that they had going on. And he was always working on interesting side hustles as well as his main gigs. And I remember at some point you had like a subscription business for underwear, monthly underwear deliveries or something like that, right? Is that still going on?
Yeah, that was the business underneath is how we coined that brand. That was like
my goodness.
Yeah, like a D2C men's underwear, socks, and shirts startup, basically. That was like a subscription service where it was like, guys, we don't want to have to think about this. We also really don't want to have to do laundry. So what if we just got new underwear, shirts, and socks every 3 months, every 6 months? And no, that is no longer a business, unfortunately. It was a fun side gig, but as we all know about side gigs, eventually they take on a life of their own, and you have to face whether or not you're going to put a lot more of your time into it. And the other 72 things we were doing, I think won out at that point.
Okay, so you have this other side hustle, Bad Christmas Movie Bingo. Tell us what that's all about.
Absolutely. It's probably my favorite side hustle of all the side hustles. So 5 years ago, my wife and I were having some wine over the holidays.
And every day.
Exactly. Every day. And this particular day with wine, we turned on a Hallmark Christmas movie, which was not really ever our jam. We never really got into them. And, we were drunk. And so then we watched it and realized how bad they are. And then we watched another one and realized that they're all the same movie to the point where we just decided to make a bingo game out of it just for our own morbid sense of enjoyment for the holiday. And all of a sudden a board game was created. So Bad Christmas Movie Bingo is a board game. It's a bingo board game designed to be played while you're watching the world's worst made-for-TV Christmas movies. It works for any made-for-TV Christmas movie. And it's got, our favorite tropes like woman with great career is sad inside. or real Santa Claus hiding in plain sight. Oh, look, a small town. You know, the things that you see when you're watching these lovely formulaic films, if you were. And, you know, honest to goodness, it took off. It started as a digital download, and then we tried to make an actual board game out of it, which we have. It's now like an actual production run game that's being sold in stores. We have wholesale accounts. It's going to be sold in Uncommon Goods this year. We actually just took it to New York Now, which is a really big wholesale trade show here in the city, and it won Best Product in our category.
That's
so
awesome.
This is a
Rad.
side gig that actually does have legs, and we've decided to put some time and effort into it, which is really cool.
Are there NFTs involved with it?
There are actually, yeah. Last year we dropped an NFT project called Bad Christmas Ornaments, which was a generative Bad Christmas ornament project that went along with the game. The utility for the NFT was actually you got a free copy of the game shipped to you anywhere in the world for free. So it was a really fun kind of like experimental kind of thing where I hired an artist. We dug into the sort of like the generative art, figuring out how to do like a 10K project style thing. And we did it ourselves, which was really amazing because at the time already working for VaynerNFT, doing all these things on a larger scale for clients. So getting to do it sort of on your own and figuring out how to do it yourself was a really interesting time.
What does that mean, generative art?
Properly speaking, real generative art is honest to goodness actual art, where an artist is creating pieces of art essentially through mathematical algorithms. So it's done through computer code, and you know, you're coding things like color and movement and lines, and once you run these algorithms, it produces an enormous number of these incredible unique pieces of digital art that are all, again, just kind of generated through random computer algorithms. That idea with things like the Bored Ape Yacht Club and some of these more popular NFTs sort of got bastardized a little bit, where they kind of took the idea of generating art to putting traits on a base character, right? So like with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is the most popular NFT of all time right now, you have the base ape character, and then you have all of these traits like laser eyes or zombie fur or whatever it is. And this is all generated through algorithms. So when someone went on the day that those NFTs dropped on their website and you clicked mint, it would essentially spin up a generated NFT in that moment with the base artwork and the traits on top of it. And that's the kind of stuff that's getting all the news and the attention and the money nowadays. But real generative art is honest to goodness phenomenal art that belongs in museums, and it's a really, really cool part of the NFT world.
That's interesting. Yeah, so you just generated 10,000 different but similar looking Christmas ornaments, and
basically, yeah.
NFTs?
So we had our base, we had like base ornaments, like we had a bunch of different base ornaments, and the point was that they were all bad, right? Like this was very much like a comedy NFT. So the base ornament would be like a half-eaten burrito or an acorn or like a raccoon hanging off of a hanger, like really bad things. And then the traits on top of them would be like mold or spiders, or like the thing was on fire. So it was this really interesting experiment of like, could we do a generative NFT project? Could it be funny? And could the utility involve, this actual real life board game that we had already made, and sort of like expanding it to the NFT masses was kind of the idea.
You mentioned utility, and I think for anyone watching that's dabbled in the world of NFTs, that's the golden word. Hey, what's the utility, man?
Utility. That's right.
When's mint? What's the utility? So from your perspective, what are some of the things that you can encapsulate in utility, and what to you, if you're looking at an NFT, what's like the minimum viable utility, the MVU?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it depends on the project. But like, for example, with a lot of the clients that we're working with at VaynerNFT, right? These are the world's largest brands. It's brands like Pepsi, Anheuser-Busch. So when we're looking at what these brands can do for their holders, for their NFT holders, you have this whole extra kind of level of like what's allowed. A lot of these things have to go through a bunch of legal teams and like all of these approvals processes, and like what can they legally give away to these customers as utility, right? So there's that side of it. But then in sort of the normal realm of NFTs, minimum viable utility at this point, I think involves sort of three major categories: experiential, physical, and digital. Experiential is probably the hardest one to do because it's like in real life experiences. So it's events, it's booking places, it involves a decent amount of investment, but it's also like an incredible experience, right? So like again with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, one of the things that they did last year was they had Ape Fest, which was this week-long in real life experiential festival where any holder of the NFT got to come and you know their tickets were free and they got to get into these amazing clubs, and this all happened in New York. So experiential is a big bucket, really hard to pull off sometimes. And then you have the physical side, which is things like merch, doing hoodies, doing hats, like being able to send the physical versions of NFT artwork to holders as like frameable pictures, that kind of stuff. Anything that can sort of be like a physical counterpart to your NFT. And then the digital is anything that would be Decentraland, the Sandbox, that kind of like Web3 experiential world, where it's like you have avatars that will work inside of all of these different platforms. Maybe like a game, like a play to earn game is going to happen through it. So that's kind of like the digital side. And those are the big buckets. And every project kind of has, you know, their own way of figuring out what they can do and what their holders want the most. And, you know, I think having a mix of all three of them at this point is maybe not expected, but if you're going to be what we would consider like a blue chip NFT project, you really have to spell these things out in a roadmap, because your holders are essentially investors at this point, like in your project, and they really care, right? They want to see a return, not only financial, but also in just kind of what they get for being a holder.
It's kind of funny thematically because we were talking about formulaic Christmas movies, and a lot of the NFT projects out there are becoming or have already become rather formulaic. You've got the 10K, 8K, 5K types of projects that are algorithmic or generative in some way. They're sort of like the profile picture projects, and they might have a couple little things like a mini game to play and things like that. But I think we've sort of hit critical mass on those things, and now we're waiting for the next layer, the new innovative ideas. Legal's a big thing now. What makes your NFT a security? Fair to say none of us are securities experts or lawyers, but the reality is something you have to think about now. So it's tricky.
Yeah, 100%. It is very tricky. And those are the conversations we're having with these big clients on a daily basis, right? Because we, you know, it's like we come to these clients, they come to us originally and say, we want to do this really big thing. We say, okay, are you thinking about this for the long term? Because we're not here to just drop a project and leave, because A, that's not great for the community, but B, that's not going to be, you know, seen as authentic to your brand or the space, right? So as we're sort of explaining the art of the possible in this world, we're giving these brands examples of what they can do and what they should do and what they should stay away from. And oftentimes when we get to the utility conversation, we on the expert side say, this is something you have to do. This is something that every collector is going to be thinking about and expecting. And then they come back to us and say, okay, what kinds of things are they expecting? And we have this, you know, like whole deck presented to them. And then they either say, yes, we can do some of that, or they say, we talked to legal, none of that's viable. Or if it is viable, it's probably all going to be over $600, which means we're going to have to send our holders a 1099, which is just not a thing
Not
in
tenable.
the Web3 world with everyone being anonymous or pseudonymous. It's that's a strange thing to have to worry about, right? So it's a really interesting conversation to have with these larger F100 and F500 companies about what is feasible and how can we change maybe how you've done this in the past in terms of sweepstakes or giveaways or rewards in a way that's still going to be true and authentic to the community.
Matt, you just made me think of something. Like, are there tax implications to NFTs that are playing out right now in the real world?
100%. Enormous tax implications, yeah.
So, like, how does that work, if you can explain it to me in layman's terms? If I buy an NFT or sell one, like, do I have to pay tax on that?
Yeah, it's very similar to stocks. So
Okay.
if you purchase an NFT and then you sell it for more than you bought it for, that is a capital gain. And now you owe capital gains taxes, right? It gets a little more complicated because the price that you bought it for in ETH at the time versus the price that you sold it for in ETH at the time
Yeah.
are probably very different.
Yeah,
So
the
if I bought an
currency's so
NFT
volatile.
last year when ETH was at $1,800 and I sold it, you know, this year or at the end of last year when ETH was at like $4,500. So it's a lot of tracking. Luckily, there are already a whole lot of like automated services and apps out there, things like Coin Tracker, that basically allow you to plug in your wallet, your public wallet, and it just kind of automates all of that stuff and will actually generate tax documents that you can then
Yeah.
hand your accountant. So, but it's very, very similar to stocks and that kind of
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, I just sent all my Coinbase stuff to my tax guy. and I'm very curious what the outcome's going to look like.
Yeah, Twitter right now is basically like NFT Twitter right now is basically just like, well, my accountant just asked me what an ETH was, so I'll see you all in jail, I guess.
Or like the stack of papers like this tall.
Yeah. I mean, this is the first time that, the NFT community is dealing with taxes, right? Because it's like this all really exploded and took off last year, and so this is the first tax season where everyone is like, oh, I actually have to deal with this from a financial and legal standpoint. Interesting. So it's for the people who sold $380,000 worth of stuff. This is going to get very interesting for them very quick.
Yeah, and there's a hidden tax in there, right? Or there's a hidden pitfall, which is that the thing you're buying NFTs with most of the time, which is some cryptocurrency, Ether, Sol, whatever, wherever you are, when you spend that on your NFT, that's at least based on the rules, based on the thoughts right now, which maybe you're not 100% clear, but that would be a crypto to crypto transaction. And so if you've held Ether for 5 years up till now and you buy an NFT with that, you owe capital gains also on the disbursement of that ETH. So there's a lot of people that are figuring this out after they've already done it.
Yep.
Now having to unravel the whole mess, and it's an unenviable position.
You have the other thing like airdrops, right? Which is another sort of big utility that happens in the with NFT projects a lot, which is that a project will essentially send you a free, second or third NFT like directly to your wallet, which we call an airdrop. And those airdrops, they have value. When they're being bought and sold, there'll be a floor price established. There'll be an average price established. And so then the question becomes, if you were sent that free NFT that's got XYZ floor price, do you now also owe taxes on this free thing that you were given essentially without your permission, right? It's not like you requested it or bought it. The project just sent it to you. It's a free thing, but it's a valuable free thing. And do you now automatically owe taxes because it's sitting in your wallet? So it's very interesting, and it's all currently being figured out as we go. The plane is being built while we're flying it, is what I like to say.
So Matt, and maybe Forrest, this is a question for you too. Like, as we were talking earlier about this generative art, made me wonder, there probably already is like an AI artist out there or multiple AI artists. But if there's an AI artist that's generating art, we know AI is programmed by somebody. Does the AI become an entity in and of itself, and like that becomes like a tax haven or something? I'm just speculating now. But I'm just curious, like, for all we know, Banksy's been an AI this whole time.
It's something we speculate about all the time, like which of these random NFT profiles is actually Banksy, and which of these artists that's been dropping all this stuff is actually Banksy. But yeah, it's very interesting, and a lot of these AI things are open source, and a lot of these AI things are like things that they built themselves in code. Some of them are like really simple JavaScript runs. Like it goes from that side to like really, really complex pieces of software. And it's a really interesting question. Forrest, I don't know if you've thought about that kind of stuff at all in terms of like where these AI programs are really going in this world, and maybe what they'll be able to do in a matter of months or years.
Yeah, I think it's hard to predict, but you have a lot of people, like I know of folks that are in aerospace and other like very mathematics, physics focused engineering roles that have now started to dabble in the NFT space because they have a firm grasp of passing these parameters to this algorithm that generates these 3D assets in this canvas. Let's add some randomization here, and you have some funky looking art that people might want to buy. And so you think about that too. Being an artist means you're a programmer or an engineer, which I think is the coolest part, is that it's now a new creative form. Like if I'm a programmer and all I'm doing is, maybe that's important work, programming for systems on aircraft, great, but maybe I want to do something else. And now this is another avenue. In terms of AI, I think there are some very misleading, this is AI generated versus actual people using like true AI or machine learning or whatever you want to call it to generate art. And so I think we're a ways away from the point where we're worrying about the tax implications or the, how to ascribe to an entity that is, that isn't sentient, I suppose. Yeah. Maybe we'll get there, but we need tax clarity first on the extra or the establishment stuff
on the
base
basics.
Level. Yeah. So what do I, as a living, breathing human being, need to do to be compliant? I think is the first step.
Matt, have you seen any trends around what makes for a successful NFT launch and what makes for a bad one?
Yeah, there are a whole lot of different things that can set a program up for success, but I see just as many of those programs that tick all of the boxes and still fail. So it is incredibly hit or miss in the space right now. One of the reasons that's the case is that you have so many copycat programs out there, right? You have so many programs that came out right after the Bored Ape Yacht Club that essentially did the same thing. And some of them are still around, the majority of them aren't. Honestly, at the end of the day, it comes down to how professional is your team? How far out are you looking? You know, if you're looking at a single drop and you try to make all of your money up front and then you don't really worry about the secondary market, which is an enormous consideration in the NFT space, then you're a short-term player that will either sell out and disappear basically and rug your community, or again, like my boss Gary V always says is, if you're looking 30 years down the road, if you're looking long term in this space and you want to be a real builder in the space, the more often we can find projects and communities that think long term and really are concerned with creating the most value for their holders and creating a real brand around what they're doing, those are the ones that more often than not are going to stick around. It can sometimes be hard to spot the difference between those things initially, but it becomes pretty clear a week or two after they mint. They either know what they're doing or they don't. So it's a really, really interesting thing to watch when these mints happen in terms of what the founders are going to do and how the community reacts.
And is there a way to like sniff that out? I read an article last week about two guys who were arrested after minting $1.1 million, and they call it a rug pull scam. So it's nice to see people getting arrested for this nonsense. But if they'd been in another country, we wouldn't have been able to arrest them. So is there a way to like sniff out these guys who are going to be scam artists?
Yes and no. I think the more that we see it happen, the more that we find that there are patterns that you can spot. Discord is one of the largest sort of community platforms in this space outside of Twitter, but Discord is really great because it allows you to do a deeper dive into what the NFT program is going to do, and you have all these different channels that just allows for a lot more detail than Twitter does. If you get on a brand new NFT project Discord and there are already 30,000 people in that Discord, that's an enormous red flag. If you see that their Twitter account already has a verified check mark and it already has 1.9 million followers and they haven't done anything yet, enormous red flag.
Why is it a red flag that they have a lot of followers?
Basically, because everything in this space happens organically. This is not the traditional Web 2 marketing space where everything is mostly paid and then a little bit of it is organic after you pay for your followers. Paid and advertised stuff in this space is basically everyone frowns on it. It's not real. So really the only way to do anything legitimate is to build up your following and your conversations organically. And as we all know, organic followings online take a long time to get to numbers approaching anywhere near those kinds of numbers. So if you see a program that has those numbers right away, you can typically be like, they definitely paid for that. And that's just not what we do here, basically.
You can take a look at something, a profile on Twitter, and then look at the Discord, like Matt said. And then you can go, at least for Twitter, you can go compare that to some like the public social media analysis sites. You can see how long that account's been around, even if they've deleted all the previous tweets that were there if they bought the account. You can go back to the first tweet about the NFT project and compare it to the open date and date of tweets before that. And you can find pretty clearly that this was a farmed and purchased account that you should be throwing up the sirens on. And also, too, sometimes projects fail for no reason other than the fact that there's too much organic hype. And there's several examples of that in this past year where projects that have pretty reasonable art, it's, maybe it's a bit formulaic, but things that have generated a lot of buzz. And because of that, you have a highly competitive mint that drives the prices up to exorbitant levels. So then right after mint, the floor price tanks. It's very illiquid. No one wants to buy at those inflated prices. And the project just almost dies right then and there, no matter how good it is from an idea and art perspective. So there's something to be said there as well. The initial mint is critical.
Absolutely. And then right after the initial mint, also the consistency of communication from the project founders to their community is also an enormous thing. I mean, we've seen essentially like, real blue chip projects like Cool Cats is one of the biggest NFT projects out there, has taken a really, really big hit over the last month because they had a whole bunch of things slated to drop kind of around the same time. They had essentially this whole new airdrop situation that involved like eggs hatching. And then also they've been working on a game, like a play to earn game. And it all took so long without much communication from the founders to their community that people just started to what we call FUD it. And FUD it stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But it's the verb that we all use for like the holders starting to get out or question the founders and all this stuff. And FUDding can happen so fast, even in a really good project, if the leadership isn't being consistent and frequent, honestly, with their communications about what's happening. That's kind of the biggest thing that I see as one of the main differentiators between the Web3 space and the Web2 space is authenticity and transparency, right? It's like when you're building an NFT project, most of these guys are building it in public while they're building it. That's almost an expectation now, where you immediately talk about what's going well, what's going wrong. If an artist did something shady, they need to come out and tell their community about it. Like it's this hard thing to do, but we all expect it, is just to be super, super transparent about everything that's happening in a project at any given moment, and do it often enough that, you don't have this echo chamber of people worrying and fudding the project.
That almost feels like it's at odds with the anonymous and pseudonymous nature of crypto in general, needing to be really open and transparent. Do you think we'll reach a point where people will only buy NFTs from people who aren't anonymous and pseudonymous because they know that they'll get arrested if they do something shady?
It's a fascinating conversation, and it's a huge paradox. You're 100% right. This is an enormous paradox in the space right now, which is that we all expect 100% privacy and anonymity while also expecting the founders of the projects to be completely doxxed. And we know who they are, and we know where they come from, and we have their LinkedIn profiles. And it's weird. And honestly, I'm not sure how we're reconciling this in any real way yet. But it's a very strange thing for the entire space to expect anonymity and privacy. But then how do you ever hold anybody accountable if something is to go wrong, or if anybody has any worries? It's a really interesting discussion.
It's a total double standard. Like, I can hold you accountable, you can't hold me accountable.
100%. And you're seeing, like with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, they're doing this enormous partnership with Animoca Brands, which is a really big partner in the space. And we're not really sure what this partnership is, but it's just the fact that there is something happening is driving this enormous amount of hype. But the first thing that happened when they announced the partnership is that they needed everybody to go to a website and essentially dox themselves through KYC. And KYC stands for Know Your Customer, but it involves, your social security number and your home address and your email address. And it's basically like, we have to know who you are to go any further. And for the largest NFT project in the space to do that is just, I think, kind of a harbinger of where we all sort of know this is headed. For these projects to stay alive and for the SEC not to ruin everything that we're trying to so beautifully build, there's going to have to be some kind of marriage here of tracking people and getting rid of some of this anonymity.
Right? You can't mutually assure destruction if I don't know who you are. And there's some sort of, I don't know, psychology that happens when you have that people behave differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
The NFT points at a URL, and presumably I'm the sort of the digital owner of that URL, right? Now, I saw an article that this model, Cara Delevingne, had minted an NFT of her vagina. And let's say that I wanted to mint an NFT on a different blockchain pointing to the same URL. I could do that, right?
In theory, yeah. I mean, as long as the URLs are public, there's no reason you couldn't.
Right. So how do I know that I'm buying the right NFT of the URL that I care about, as opposed to some copycat one?
Yeah, I mean, we're now getting down into the nitty gritty of what it really means to have a token or to own anything at all in this space. And this is where the arguments that, we call them the right-click savers come out, right? Which is like, well, can't I just right-click save this image and now I own the image? And it's like, sure, you own the image, but you don't own the token. And there is a true difference between owning a token and owning an image. But Chad, you're right in that just because you own that token doesn't necessarily mean that you immutably own the image that you originally had that went with that token.
Well, that's a different question. Let's say it is the same image or video in this case or whatever it is, but it's a different blockchain. So it's a different token of the same image that's how do I know I'm buying? I really want to own her vagina. So let's say I want. How do I know I'm buying it on this blockchain as opposed to that blockchain? Like, what's the real one? Is there? How would I sort through with that?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you would need to go to the contract itself. You would need to because the contracts that these things are built on and minted on, you can check them and scroll through them and verify them on sites like Etherscan, or Polygon Scan. So, but you have to have a decent working knowledge of what a token contract or an NFT contract actually looks like to really know this kind of stuff. But again, the nice thing is that contracts are verifiable. And you can always look through them. You can always see if they're real. You can actually read through the entire contract, like all of the code that was written to create the contract and to mint the NFTs. And you're going to be able to see all of the image URLs there inside of that contract. So there are real ways to tell, but that isn't the same thing as, does the image that it's pointing to, does that always remain permanent, right? That's a different interesting discussion.
Well, Matt, even just the validation criteria you just went through, like, there's no way my mom's going to do that. Not saying my mom would ever even know how to buy an NFT. She may one day show me, hey, look at this NFT I bought at Circle K.
It's true. It's true. We have an enormous amount, it's like when we think about the original websites, right? It's like even before we had real web addresses, back when everything was just DNS and IP addresses, it was not consumer facing yet. Right. The web was not consumer facing. And honestly, we're sort of at that point right now in the Web3 world, is that it's not really consumer facing, because my mom is not going to go through and check the contract on Etherscan to make sure that it's not a rug, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in the next 5 years to essentially make this a lot more user friendly as a whole.
Well, and I think that's totally accurately said. Back in the day when things were just BBS boards or whatever, and you had to log in with your modem, the total addressable market for people that you could scam was tiny, and those people were pretty technically adept, at least at some point. And nowadays, with social media and the speed at which information travels to anybody, it's so much easier to scam people, and like all this confusion has to be weeded through. So it's just kind of a different thing. Like, I agree with you. We're in that early bleeding edge adopter phase. But the lines get blurred now because things travel so fast. Yeah. And, the fact that my mom even knows what an NFT is blows my mind. But she has no idea what to do about it, right? She's just like, hey, what is this thing?
I got my mom a wallet. I helped her set up a wallet. I helped her set up a Coinbase account. I sent her a couple NFTs. Otters are her favorite animals, and there's this really cool otter NFT project called Otter Army. I've known this dude for like a year. So I sent her a couple ones, and she loves it. But like, if I was ever like, Mom, go check your NFTs, like go to OpenSea, connect with your wallet, and she'd be like, what are the words you just said? I don't remember.
Right. Can you repeat?
She would have no idea. She would have absolutely no idea how to do any of that. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing of like, yes, we're on the bleeding edge, but also we do have people in the space who are in the space because, owning one of these NFTs is like owning a Rolex or owning a Lamborghini, and they can so easily get scammed for so much money at this point. And we're seeing this so much on Twitter and Discord with all of these scam links and scam mints, and we're all trying to do our best to tell them, to stay away and like, this is a scam, but they are so sophisticated at this point that it can be really difficult.
I gotta believe there's a website where you can go and buy physical Bitcoin, and it's just a total joke. But people don't know that. That commercial where there's the woman that's showing her Facebook wall on her actual wall with Post-its? Like, I unfriend you, tear that Post-it off the wall and throw it in the garbage.
Yep.
I can imagine the same thing. Like,
I have this one Bitcoin. You're like, sure, Grandma, let's get you to bed.
Sure you do.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I think all of these scams follow a very similar pattern to scams throughout history, and also like sales tactics throughout history. If you get an email or a message or pretty much any other form of communication, Morse code and smoke signals included, that are telling you need to act immediately and you need to give me some information, just don't do it. And you will eliminate 98% of scams. There'll be a couple where they very carefully socially engineer you for 2 months if they know you have something valuable. But most of them are, go here, connect your wallet to get some free thing, or to mint this project that's, hey, VaynerNFTs that no one knows about. come get them now, and then they drain your wallet.
Yeah,
That's usually how they work.
The unknown extra mint is one of the biggest scams, where it's like,
Yes.
if you're in a large project's Discord, and all of a sudden there's a message that's saying extra secret mint. I know we've already done all these and they're all worth $300,000 a piece, but we're doing more of them for
free.
not a lot of money. Click this link. Like, come on, that's an enormous red flag. But is that an immediate red flag to everybody? They're going to get enough people that FOMO into it. They're like, oh my God, I have to take advantage of this now. To Forrest's point, it's the the act immediately and give us just enough information that it can be a little scary out there.
Can anybody mint an NFT? Like, let's say we wanted to mint an NFT of this episode. What would be the process for that?
Oh, that's a fun question. Yeah, so the process of minting an NFT can be complicated, and it can also be incredibly simple depending on the contract that you want to use. So the largest NFT marketplace, OpenSea, allows you to just essentially go connect your wallet and mint whatever you want as an NFT in a couple steps for not a lot of money. It might cost you 0.1 ETH or less, which would be like maybe $300, $200 to mint essentially whatever you want. Now, the issue with that is that that's great, and it is done on OpenSea's shared contract. Right? So you're minting it, but you're doing it on OpenSea's shared contract, which means it's their token, it's their contract. You don't really have ownership over this token that you've minted. You're kind of trading away a little bit of that sovereignty for the ease of being able to mint it on this large, easy-to-use platform, versus being able to go on something like Manifold, which is a relatively new contract creation and minting website, where if you're slightly more technically savvy, and I don't even mean knowing code at all, you just know that you go to this website, connect your wallet, and click through a couple more steps, you now own that contract outright yourself, and the cost to mint it is like 10 times less. There's this really interesting trade-off between ease of use and what you end up getting for it, but as long as you have a wallet, you can absolutely go spin up and mint an NFT right now, and it'll take you 10 minutes or less.
Does it have to be that way, or is that just how OpenSea's doing it to make money?
Honestly, that's just how OpenSea is doing it.
They could give me ownership of it.
They've integrated with Manifold to where if you go on OpenSea and mint it, you can actually use Manifold to mint it on OpenSea, and now you do own the contract. So that's a relatively new thing. So there are ways that they could make it easier, and they are making it easier, but everything is, again, still new enough that like things are still on their roadmap for 2 or 3 years out to be able to, like, if we wanted our moms to be able to mint an NFT. I don't think we're quite there at in terms of like the user experience and the user interface, but like, honest to goodness, we're closer than we think.
Yeah, there's been a lot of progress on that. An NFT itself is actually so much simpler in like what it actually is in bits and bytes than I think many people think it is. Like in its simplest form, you look at a smart contract or a contract, which is just basically logic, right, written in code. An NFT is quite literally an unsigned integer, so a positive integer value, which is an ID of that token. So that uniquely identifies the token. And that maps as a key to a value, which is your address, which is like your username in blockchain world, right? That's like the simplest form, right? You have a uniquely identified thing, a piece of data that's mapped to you. You're the owner. And if you want to change that ownership, you have to sign for that transaction to change ownership to somebody else.
It's an entry in a ledger. Just like every other thing on blockchain, just like all of Bitcoin is literally just an entry in a ledger that says, this is what I own, or this is who I'm sending it to, and this is the value assigned to it. Yeah. And honest to goodness, at the end of the day, that's all it really is.
It's so simple when you break it down like that. Chad, I was thinking maybe I wanted to ask you guys about how this is going to affect B2B business over time and how it's already working, like, because Chad and I both work on the software sales side. We've been selling software for a long, long time. And I'm just curious, like, how NFTs and things like that are going to start to infiltrate the B2B commerce space.
That's a really fascinating question. I love looking down the road to see, like what does all of this look like 10 years from now? And I don't even think we honestly use the word NFT 10 years from now. I think that's just how we describe it now. And I think 10, 20 years down the road, everything will just be a smart contract on the blockchain, no matter what transaction it is, whether it's a ticket that you're buying or a piece of software that you're licensing or transferring from one business to another. This will just all be done digitally on the blockchain, and you really won't think anything of it, right? You won't have to ascribe concepts of NFTs and all this stuff. It's just the infrastructure and the process with which we do everything now.
Well, yeah, you could imagine like someone on Amazon today buying something that is an entry in a ledger in an Oracle database. I don't know what Amazon uses. Doesn't matter.
Not Oracle.
But 10 years from now, I'm buying something on Amazon or their main competitor that destroyed them, and I don't care. It's writing somewhere else. It just happens the implementation details now writing a smart contract on a blockchain. Right?
That's exactly right. And this is how we describe it to a lot of people. If we're doing an educational session, because one of the big things we do at Vayner is like these really, really deep, long educational sessions with brands about what is Web3, what are NFTs, what is the blockchain. And the way that we describe it is, again, thinking about 10 years down the road. We won't even be using these terms. This is how we will buy and sell cars. This is how we will transfer. This is how we'll buy an airline ticket. This is how we'll transfer money between each other. And it's just all the same thing as we're doing now, which is everything in the world is entries in a ledger. We're just, using the blockchain instead of Excel.
But you're saying NFTs will become the technical implementation of how these things are done? Like, I buy a movie ticket, it's actually an NFT underneath? Is that what you think the future is?
If we want to think about it in those terms now, the movie ticket sure is an NFT. I'm just saying 10 years from now, we won't even think about it as an NFT. It'll just be buying a movie ticket. And we'll just get rid of the idea of, the movie ticket is now an NFT. Like, that's weird transitional language because we're not all there yet. But the whole idea of it being a digital asset will just be normal, and to the point where we won't have to say it anymore, right? So like calling something an NFT will no longer be necessary. They'll all basically just be non-fungible digital assets. And it'll just be the backbone of our economy and of commerce and of transportation and of just the way that we do stuff on a day-to-day basis.
What I think is compelling in that is you almost have this opportunity for much broader unification of how I own things, how you own things. It's like if I buy, 40 in-game items across 10 different video games, and then I have a bunch of concert and movie tickets, I don't need 45 different accounts with passwords I'll never remember and ledger entries that are transparent only to the company that I've purchased them from. Theoretically, of course, a lot of things need to happen maturity-wise for us to realize that type of future. But I think that's the compelling vision for what it could be.
Yeah, it's like a shared definition globally of what it means to have digital ownership.
And once we get past the idea of different blockchains, like eventually there will be some sort of unichain that is either one blockchain or it allows complete seamless interoperability between chains and allows you to take, this in-game item. And again, it's like right now we're calling certain in-game items that we buy with Ethereum NFTs, but we won't call them, they'll just be in-game items that we buy, and we can take them from one game to another game, and then we can also display them in our virtual museum, and it will just be this beautiful, flexible way that we exist in the world that's enabled by blockchain technology that we don't have to think about as a new fancy thing anymore. And that's an exciting future, and I hope we get there.
Well, so I get that for digital assets, but what about physical assets? I remember you posted something, and we talked about it on a previous episode about the Mondavi wine release that had an NFT with it. Why do I need an NFT for this thing? I physically hold the bottle. Like it's not in question about whose it is. It's mine. I'm holding it right now.
Well, that's an interesting question you bring up about, there's no question that I own this bottle, right? So the reason, one of the things that we pitched Mondavi on as far as this program goes is that it's a way to combat fraud in the wine industry. Because the wine industry, when we're talking about high-end wines, has as much, if not more fraud in it than the art industry does. So how do you verify that the bottle of wine that you just paid $3,300 for is in fact the real authentic bottle of Mondavi that you bought and not a forgery? And the way that we're trying to look at this is, can we integrate the blockchain into verifying that this piece of physical product is what it appears to be? The way that this works in particular with that project, actually, so the people who bought this bottle of wine purchased the NFT first because the bottles of wines are still maturing. Once the bottles of wines are ready, it's going to be delivered to them. They're going to go pick it up. They're going to have this incredible utility tasting experience to go along with it. But on the bottle will be a QR code that goes to the smart contract blockchain transaction of the NFT that they minted. So the NFT that they minted corresponds to the physical bottle in a way that you can't scam by pretending that this bottle of wine is the real thing. So that's where I think it comes in with the physical stuff, is being able to verify that it's the real thing.
Walk me through this. Okay, so my wife is really into wine. She's a certified sommelier by the Court of Master Sommeliers. She wants to buy this. She's thinking about buying this bottle of wine. She's not sure if it's the real one. How does she verify it's the real one?
Let's assume for a second that these bottles of wines are out in the world at this point. So if she walks into a store and there's a bottle of this wine, first of all, the bottle is a porcelain bottle created by these master porcelain makers in France that would be really difficult to forge anyway. But let's just leave that alone for a second. Let's pretend it's a glass bottle and you want to make sure that it's not a fraudulent, bottle of wine. The QR code or whatever we're going to end up using, it might be near field communication technology. We're working through the way to scan it, but you're able to scan a thing that's on the bottle that will take you to the actual minting transaction for the corresponding NFT. So what that allows you to do is essentially see the purchase and transfer history of this bottle of wine, because the NFT that goes with it, across whether it was minted, bought, sold, traded, or whatever. You can see who currently owns it and which bottle of wine it's supposed to correspond to.
Because I'm pulling up a website that shows the transfer ownership history.
Yeah. Essentially, you're pulling up a website like Etherscan, which is, again, like a website that allows you to look at the public wallet transfer and transaction history of that NFT. So you can see which wallet it started in, if it was sold or traded, you can see which wallet it went to, for how much money, and all the way back to when it was minted in the first place.
And there's some way to verify that the original wallet was actually Mondavi, and I'm not faking this whole other process.
Exactly. And that's one of the beautiful things about the blockchain and NFTs is the transparency of all of this. The wallet that originally minted all of these is Robert Mondavi's wallet that we helped them set up. And you can always see which bottles of wine they minted and when this took place, the exact dates and times. So it's all verifiable is kind of the argument for this.
How would she verify that was actually Robert Mondavi's wallet?
If you go, so in this particular instance, if you were to go to OpenSea or Robert Mondavi's website where they're still minting the bottles of wine, you'll be able to click through nft.robertmondaviwinery.com. You can actually find the contract and their address there on the website.
Okay. So their website would say, here's the hexadecimal number of my wallet or whatever. And then that's the same as what's in the contract.
Exactly. Same with OpenSea, the secondary market. You would be able to see that this is the Robert Mondavi Winery collection. It's got the verified check mark, and you can click all the way back to the wallet. It's got the official Twitter, the official website, all of that kind of stuff. So that's all verifiable all the way back to their official wallet. Yeah.
Matt, you're making me think of how much life imitates art here, where, I've been playing Cyberpunk on my PlayStation a little bit.
Sure.
And it just makes me think the digital black market has been existing for a while, right? Like Pirate Bay and all that stuff. But it's just going to get worse and worse, and it's going to become more important, to Chad's point about how does his wife validate that what she bought is the real thing. And while you guys were talking, I was thinking Pappy Van Winkle is one of those things where I've heard about all the fraud, and I've had it twice now in a bar, and I actually don't know if it was the real Pappy.
Sure.
And it makes me wonder if hey, I go to a bar and I want to have a really nice whiskey or scotch or tequila or something. How do I know that I'm actually getting the real thing?
Wouldn't it be nice if that was an easy thing to check?
Yes,
right?
It would be amazing.
If you could can I just see the bottle really quick, and you get to scan this thing, and it takes you all the way back to the smart contract that Pappy Van Winkle spun up when they, minted how they all did this, right? And again, we don't have to think about it now as NFTs. That's just how we'll be able to transact and verify stuff in the future. But there is a cool future in which that kind of stuff becomes easy to check on, which would be really nice. Now, whether or not the bar waters it down,
that's exactly
is a
where I was
different
going. It's this bottle of tequila, amazingly, it lasts for 2 months. The project that David Friedberg is launching soon, Canna, is this new molecular egg type device that can manufacture drinks and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it made me think it would be amazing to have a glass that had some digital component to it that could validate that what you just poured into my glass was the actual thing, and it has the right levels of things, so I can verify that it's not watered down. This is a
That would
weird
be
dream of
amazing.
maybe a potential alcoholic here, but it's just kind
I
of
love that.
Potential.
Yes.
All right, we just have a couple minutes left. I know Forrest wanted to get some alpha on something you guys are working on, right?
Yeah, well, we can try. Let's see. So on the Vayner side, everyone who's watching or listening or whatever is going to ask, hey, what's next? What's coming down the pike? What can you share, if anything, even very, very heavily veiled hints at what may be to come? I would be remiss if I didn't at least try.
Absolutely. Got to get that alpha right. Got to get that alpha. Well, let's see what I can say. The clients that we're currently working with, a lot of them are pretty publicly well known, like Anheuser-Busch. We've done drops for Budweiser, we've done drops for Bud Light. And I can say that the roadmap on the Anheuser-Busch side is long and pretty detailed. So I would definitely say stay tuned for some really, really cool stuff coming from that side of it. Also working with Pepsi. We had the mic drop NFTs that happened in the fall of last year. There's also definitely going to be some stuff with Pepsi down the road coming up in 2022. And then as far as the other clients that we're working with right now that haven't dropped NFTs yet, I'm not sure I'm at liberty to say which clients we can talk about right now, but there are some really, really large, cool brands, very, very historic American brands that you'll hear a lot about in the coming weeks. In fact, in the coming months. And then you have things like VCon coming up, right? Which is Gary V's big VFriends conference. I mean, he's already announced most of the speakers that are happening at VCon. We're doing some really amazing activations at VCon with some of the brands that we work with. That conference is gonna be more than meets the eye in terms of what we've been able to talk about so far. And then also just, stay tuned for things like NFT NYC, which is happening in late June. We had a bit of a presence there at Vayner last year. We have hopefully some very interesting things planned.
I'll probably see you there.
Oh, you'll definitely see me there. You'll see a bunch of us speaking there as well. I know there's a number of us at Vayner who have some speaking slots. Our president, Avery Akinini, who's just phenomenal in the space, she's going to be speaking again. But that's probably all the alpha I can say right now.
Fair enough.
Right on, Chad. We should consider going to that and doing a live episode or something. That might be fun. We can call it software and NFT rather than software and blue.
Can I get that NFT in blue?
Oh, love it.
Probably.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up, Matt. Thanks for joining us today. That was super fun, and you're a very engaging speaker about this topic. So
Thanks
you
for
coming.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Pleasure
my
to meet
pleasure.
you.
Anytime, have me back anytime. Happy to chat about NFTs, the future of Web3, where all this crazy stuff is going, because it's such an exciting world right now. I feel like we're at the very, very beginning of where websites were and where the internet was in the mid-late 90s, and it's just, can't wait to see what happens next.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you like this episode, share it out on LinkedIn. That's where most of our people find us, because it's kind of a professional episode. But we also now have video access both on YouTube and on Spotify. So if you're watching us on Spotify, thanks for that. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.